Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Welcome aboard a Captain's Mindset podcast, where we believe that everyone has the potential to be the captain of their own life. I'm your host, Kyle Freiberger, and I'm excited to announce that today is First Class Friday, a short episode filled with valuable lessons and tips for becoming a better leader. After spending the majority of my life in the pursuit of becoming an airline captain, I realized that true happiness and fulfillment came from something much deeper than career success. At the age of 34, I took a leap of faith and left my perfect job to become an entrepreneur. This podcast is my way of helping people who feel stuck in life, or even those who have achieved success but still feel unfulfilled. On First Class Fridays, we'll dive into specific topics related to leadership and personal development, all in under 15 minutes. My goal is to give you bite-sized insights that you can apply right away to start developing a captain's mindset and lead your life with purpose and intention. I'm not perfect, and I don't pretend to be. That's why this podcast is filled not only with my life lessons, but also with insights from other successful leaders in business and in everyday life. My hope is that each episode of a Captain's Mindset podcast will help you unlock your potential and create a positive impact on the world. So fasten your seatbelts and get ready for a First Class Friday experience. If you find value in this podcast episode, please subscribe and share it with other like-minded individuals. Thank you for joining me, and I hope you enjoy this episode. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of First Class Friday on the Captain's Mindset podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Freiberger, and today we're going to get talking about the 5 things that I've learned as an airline captain. So let's jump right in. So I was an airline captain for over 4 years, and I was an airline pilot in the airlines for over 10 years, but basically started learning to be a pilot when I was 9 years old. So I've been in the industry for quite a while, and there's a lot of things that I learned, and they're very similar to real life. They really do play a crucial role in everyday life as well. So I'm going to share with you those 5 lessons and how you can apply them to your everyday life, not just when you're the captain of an airliner. So number 1, communication is key. Communication is everything. So in aviation, we call it crew resource management, which is different levels of communication in how we do that, whether it's checklists, whether it's procedures, things that if I say something that the co-pilot he knows exactly when I say a certain thing that he either says a certain thing back to me. And so there's different levels of communication in airlines. And personal story for myself is even with the passengers, there's a lot of communication that has to happen. And we had one time I was leaving Las Vegas, and we were severely late. Everybody was annoyed. I think we were almost 3 hours late, and I continuously was giving updates. There was things outside of our control. We had some mechanical issues with the airplane that we need to get fixed, and then I think it was a really hot day there. So we were doing our best. But the one thing that typically happens with passengers, and this is something from experience and really understanding, is that passengers are just typically focused on the fact that they got to get to where they're trying to get to, because they have plans, because they have a car that's waiting for them, or a scheduled person that's going to pick them up. So when you're making an announcement as a captain, especially when you're thinking about communication, you really want to make sure that you understand what people are frustrated and empathize with the fact that people are frustrated. It's okay to be frustrated. It's okay to feel anxious because you have these things on the other side of the flight at the end destination that are waiting for you, these plans. So when you make your announcement, what I do is I always help people understand that safety is our number one. And I always say it in the sense that safety is our number one, and I'm sure everybody can appreciate that. And that just doing that and incorporating that into my announcements helps people to realize, oh yeah, safety, yeah, please be safe. You don't want to take off unless we're 100% safe. So super key piece of the communication. So when you are communicating with other people, really try to think about your connection with that person. Like, why are they frustrated? Why are they stressed? Why are they feeling the way that they're feeling? And you don't necessarily have to understand it, but you can understand that if somebody feels frustrated, that a feeling of frustration that sucks. And you can empathize with the fact that they feel frustrated. even if you don't know why exactly they feel frustrated. So you need to make that person feel safe. And then once you've made that person feel safe now, and they feel like there's a saying, people don't care about how much you know unless they know how much you care. So once somebody feels safe, when somebody feels like you care, communication is going to exponentially open up for you. And then the next thing you can do on top of that is ask clarifying questions, ask good questions, because the most important thing is that how that person perceives your words, not the words that you use. But if you're trying to communicate a message to somebody, the more important part is how they perceive that message. Okay, bullet number 2, or the second thing I learned, is making decisions under pressure. So making decisions under pressure is not easy. The first thing you have to do is understand the pressure of the situation. So you really have to understand, is this critical? Is this life or death? Like, what is the level? Am I causing more pressure on myself than I need to? So a thing that we always talk about is, do we have time or no time? The first question we ask ourselves in any situation, I still do this: time, no time. Do I have time or do I not have time? Right? There's very few times, and in my aviation career, there was very, very, very few times where I actually didn't have time. I was basically, I don't know if there was ever a time, but when we're in the simulator, there was times where they're pushing us to that point where we got to say, okay, there's no more time, and you have to react accordingly. So time, no time. And, an example of this is I took off out of Toronto. I had 200 people on board, fully fueled up, going to Costa Rica, and we had a hydraulic failure. So there's 3 hydraulic systems. One of our systems failed. Coming out of Toronto was about half hour into the flight. And, the first thing I ask ourselves, time, no time. Because again, as soon as the system fails, there's all these bells and whistles going off, and it's quite startling at the start. Number one thing we have to do is time, no time. Well, we knew we had time because we have 2 backup systems. So there's definitely, safety is not an issue. It could be an issue if we did not calm ourselves down and we did not ask that question, but it was not an issue. So we took our time, we collaborated, we circled around for over an hour, checked all of the boxes, went through the manuals, went through the checklist. We talked to maintenance, we talked to air traffic, we asked everybody for anything that we could have missed, my co-pilot and then we landed safely. So that's a time where we have time, and then once you have time, you collaborate and use everybody around you, and that's one of the keys to high pressure decision making. So when you are trying to make a decision, try to ask yourself if you have time, no time. If you have time, collaborate. Go out, ask people for their perspective. Even if it's a perspective you don't agree with, take it into your arsenal of perspectives and then make the best decision that you can. If you're under a lot of pressure, you have to release yourself from that pressure, right? When you're trying to decide on trying to get an airplane, to push back and on its way, you can't be thinking about the 200 people in the back who are going to their vacation and how they've spent all their money on this vacation. And then if you don't push back, or if that you don't get the flight going, that they're going to lose their money, right? Because if I thought about that, it's going to absolutely put a lot of pressure on myself. I have to think about safety over everything. So think about safety, survival, that comes over everything. Okay, bullet number 3, the importance of teamwork. The third thing that I learned as a airline captain was teamwork. So crucial. You cannot fly an airliner by yourself. You just can't. I don't even like flying small planes by myself anymore. Understanding that having a second set of eyes is so crucial, so imperative, so helpful, and just adds such a level to safety that you just can't add by yourself. So it actually takes about 70 people to get an airliner to the point where it pushes back and takes off. And if you think about that, there's gate agents, there's ticket sales, there's air traffic control, there's dispatchers, there's ground handlers, there's baggage load. There's so many people involved in one flight that it's not even funny. So something that is super important is delegation. So a lot of teamwork, especially from the captain or the leadership side, is understanding how to delegate and who to delegate to. So, when I was talking about the hydraulic failure, understanding that I have a co-pilot just as capable as me, right? Like the only difference between a co-pilot and a captain is the title, but just as capable. We do the same training. So understanding, trusting him or her, and then trusting my back end crew, the flight attendants, understanding that they have a job to do. I can't be sitting there trying to make sure that they do their job perfectly. I have my job to do. So really trusting each other in our individual roles is super important. Um, and then, the last piece of this was understanding that, if you build a strong relationship, you have to do that to have trust. You have to have trust in the relationships. Otherwise you cannot communicate effectively. So people don't, again, like we said at the start, people don't care about how much you know unless they know how much you care. So you have to build trust, you have to build respect. And a lot of that comes from job titles and qualifications at the start for the initial trust and the initial respect. But that won't last unless you continuously build that trust and build that respect. Okay. So when you're trying to be a good team player, think about collaboration. Don't think about competition. Think about asking questions. Don't think about making demands or giving the answers all the time. Think about supporting. Think about empathizing with people. Don't judge people, right? Judgments are only good when you're deciding who to put in what position, maybe, or who to delegate tasks to. But then outside of that, don't judge so that you can learn, so that you can help the people around you. Uh, the fourth thing that I learned becoming an airline captain was flexibility and adaptability. This goes so hand in hand with everything I do in my life. Being flexible and adaptable is literally the most important thing you can do if you want to evolve and grow as a human being. So in aviation, it's super unpredictable. Every single flight is unique. You cannot predict everything. You can try. We do plan a lot, and we do have a lot of backups, but we also plan for the unpredictable. We also plan that things aren't going to go to plan. So there's so many variables. You can't train from them all. You have to collaborate. You have to understand when there's time and when there's no time. And when there's no time, again, like it's back to, you have to practice for those situations where you have no time, so that it becomes instinctive, so that you can react in an order to maintain safety, integrity, and survival. So, there's a lot of times where you have to practice when you don't have time. And we do that in the simulator, and we're going to talk about that in just a moment. But, a time for me, and a big thing in aviation, is always weather. Weather is one of the most unpredictable things. We have a pretty good grasp on predicting it, yet it's still very unpredictable. I remember one time flying into Toronto, and it was supposed to be a beautiful day. And this is after flying from overseas. I believe we were coming from Italy. It was, an 8-hour flight. Well, in 8 hours, a lot can change. And we were coming into Toronto, and there's this random downpour of rain. And the weather wasn't even that bad, but it was a random downpour, and it caused some delays. And then ended up being a backup of traffic in the air because, we can't land all the airplanes at once. So I think we were 20th in line for landing. And we looked at our fuel and we said, well, let's go divert somewhere and get some more gas. And so we were being proactive. We didn't wait until we had to. We didn't wait until last minute. We just knew that it's the safest thing to do. We didn't predict it. We had to talk to dispatch. We had to coordinate. We had to, come up with the plan. But we had time. We still had time because we were proactive. So you always want to try and stay ahead of the curve, be proactive, plan, but not just plan thinking that it's all going to go right. Sometimes plan that there's going to be variables that you never accounted for. And then you find, comfort, and you find confidence in your ability to adapt. So super important. And, it's so important. You have to stay flexible. You can't commit. And especially if you think about an airliner, and this is another piece, we never commit to landing. So if you think about, that sounds really weird, but it's true. So back in the day, we used to think, okay, at a certain point, usually at 200 feet, you would commit to landing. But that didn't make sense either, because even at 3 feet off the ground, maybe there's an animal that runs out in front of the plane, or maybe there's a gust of wind that pushes you, and it's still safer to go around. So at 200 feet, instead of committing to landing, we just say continue, suggesting that we're just continuing and we're seeing, but we're always thinking, okay, might have to go around. We might have to go around. Okay. So that is a big piece of thinking for, not being, that's a big piece of understanding that there's so many variables. Okay, so some ways that you can improve your flexibility and your adaptability is challenge everything that you think you know. And understanding that when you plan for things, you can also plan for things not working. And that's okay too. It doesn't mean you have to figure out a plan if things don't work, or exactly the plan, but just understanding that you're capable of adapting, you're capable of learning. Think about the people around you that can help you. And just because you change your mind, or just because you make a different decision, or a previous decision now you realize maybe wasn't the best decision, it doesn't mean you're wrong. It just means that you're wiser and you're smarter and you have more knowledge and you have more experience. So now you're making better decisions. That's the process of growth. And then the last thing that goes hand in hand with everything we've been talking about so far is the need for continuous improvement. So, as an airline captain, the need for continuous learning and improvement was absolutely one of the most important things. And as we train every 6 months, we get into the simulator, and the point is to continuously learn and improve. And not just that, we had memos and bullets and updates coming out every day. And so it was a never ending thing of continuous improvement. But that was good, because what this means is that there's always new stats, new resources, new experiences, new knowledge that we have, that the airlines gather from around the world, and then they evolve their decisions and their procedures based upon those stats. So that means that aviation just keeps getting safer and safer and safer. And that was one of the best reasons that I loved that job, was because it just keeps getting safer. So it's in your interest, and you become motivated when you think about that, to continuously keep learning and improving. And if you think about that in your general day-to-day life, your life just gets better. Your life gets easier. It gets more content, happier, funner, and easier, not in the sense of less challenging. You'll probably become more challenging, but you're going to realize that the more challenging, the more you grow, the more you learn, the more content, the more happy, the more fulfilled. That's what your life becomes when you are a student for your entire life. So I've spent tens of thousands of dollars on my leadership skills. I've spent it on my communication skills, my team building skills, and I'll continue to spend money on myself. And I tell my fiance all the time, there's three things when it comes to spending money that I'll spend my money on: appreciating assets, uh, personal learning and health, and I get this right. Investments, so appreciating assets, other investments as well. My health, which is an investment into myself, and then experiences. Those are the three things I always think about when I'm going to spend money on something. And the importance of all of this is we have to keep up to date with everything that's going on. Technology is changing. The world is changing. If we stay stuck in our bubble, if you think about our parents sometimes, and not every parent by any means, but think about how hard it is to adapt through the technological transformation that we've had over the last 20 years. Either you adapted and you find success, and you're able to use technology, or you didn't, and maybe you have a grandparent or a parent that you're thinking about right now and thinking, wow, yeah, like they have a really hard time using a computer, and like that would be really difficult to communicate and email and stay up to date on things if you couldn't use a computer. So we have to continuously be willing to learn. And on that note, we have to understand that mistakes are going to be made. It's not mistakes that we should be trying to avoid. It's trying to avoid making the same mistake twice. That's it. So once you make a mistake, we need to focus on learning from it so we don't make that mistake again. And remember, just because you make the mistake again, you probably didn't make it the exact same way. So sometimes you'll make a mistake in a similar fashion, but it will be different each time. And you have to look at every time what you've learned, how you're better, and how that mistake helped you grow. So always stay a student, teach others. When you close the learning loop, when you teach others, you'll figure out really quickly what you actually know and what you just think you know, and then collaborate with other people, build each other up, and that's going to really be your success when it comes to learning and improvement is your ability to go out, push yourself, challenge yourself, and keep learning and growing. So again, the 5 things that I learned as an airline captain: communication, decision making under pressure, teamwork, flexibility and adaptability, constant learning and improvement, all super important in aviation, but not just in aviation, but in everyday life. Those skills are transferable, those skills are applicable in every area of your life. And if you go out there and you start thinking about each area, each one of those things, and just pick something that you can practice in your day-to-day life, I promise you, you are going to see a change in your life, and you're going to see a change in the lives of the people around you, because you're an influence on everybody that's around you as well. So keep that in mind. Hope you enjoyed this episode, and thanks for tuning in. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Captain's Mindset Podcast. We hope you found value in our discussion of leadership and personal development. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing and leaving us a review. Your feedback helps us improve the show and reach more listeners. Remember, everyone has the potential to be a leader in their own life. Keep working on developing a captain's mindset and leading with purpose and intention. Join us next time for more insights and tips on how to become the best version of yourself. And until then, keep navigating through the ups and downs of your life with a captain's mindset, and always steer towards becoming the best version of yourself. Become the captain of your own life.